In recent months, a troubling shift has emerged in global geopolitics. The United Kingdom, an official ally and historically one of the closest partners of the United States, has suddenly found itself under China's close attention. And this is not just rumor. According to several insider reports and publications from reputable outlets, Beijing is actively investing in Britain's critical infrastructure, expanding its economic and political influence, while Washington is realizing it is losing control of the situation. First, about investments. The Independent recently published an investigation into which Chinese corporate assets are already operating in the United Kingdom, from universities and research centers to critical infrastructure. Analysts note that Chinese investments in key British industries are becoming unstoppable. Among the alarming signs is the growing Chinese participation in projects that have traditionally been considered strategically important for the state. Moreover, sources inside the British Parliament report a sharp increase in the number of Chinese lobbyists and consultants closely linked to large investment flows from China. According to one former parliamentary advisor, meetings with representatives of Chinese funds now take place almost daily, and they come with a clear geopolitical message. Britain must become the platform for integrating the Chinese economy into Europe. These claims have not yet been officially confirmed but reflect a growing trend. Against this background, an uneasy picture is forming. Britain, once a loyal ally of the United States, is gradually diverging and directing parts of its attention and resources toward China. Britain was the first partner country with which Trump signed a trade agreement, receiving the lowest tariffs. Yet even that privilege did not prevent London from drawing closer to China economically. According to insider sources, Britain is considering the possibility of partially switching its trade settlements to Yuan, an extremely rare and symbolically powerful move that analysts describe as a challenge to the global dollar system. British officials explain it simply: we need to simplify transactions with China, but experts see it differently. When America's closest ally chooses the currency of its rival, it is not just convenience, it is a signal. Reports from international financial forums note that China is increasing its influence not only through direct investments, but also through financial instruments and lobbying across Europe. Today, Britain is turning, according to one respected business journal, into the European bridgehead of China's global strategy. And the issue is not only economic, it is about security, influence, and control. Meanwhile, Washington appears disoriented. Despite loud declarations from the Trump administration about restoring American influence, Britain has become a particular point of concern for the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence agencies. Internal reports leaking from closed briefings emphasize that if China manages to deepen its presence in British infrastructure, it would undermine the United States' ability to use Britain as a platform for military response and economic pressure. And another key element is infrastructure itself. Britain is opening its doors to Chinese capital in areas long considered sensitive: telecommunications, energy, and transport. Although the British government officially calls for caution, and some members of parliament demand a review of Chinese investments in infrastructure, in practice, the pace of Chinese involvement continues to accelerate. One report notes that this is no longer about buying and selling, but about long-term partnerships and even participation in management. What does this mean for the United States? It means that an ally Washington has always relied on is beginning to act increasingly autonomously, and even in ways that run counter to U.S. interests. The very fact that Britain is considering settlements in Yuan is equivalent to a quiet rejection of the dollar as the sole currency of global influence. This means China is gaining strength and doing so quietly, but systematically. The United States, meanwhile, is showing weakness. Its rhetoric is loud, but its real actions are limited, and when geopolitical rivals detect vulnerability, they exploit it aggressively. It must be noted that this is not just an economic game, it is a political and strategic one, in which Britain has become a bridgehead for change. If today investments are being accepted, lobbying is intensifying, and settlements are shifting, then tomorrow may come a moment when Britain will no longer be seen as America's British shield, but as part of a new Chinese economic architecture. Reputable publications are already warning that the inflow of Chinese investments into British infrastructure could have consequences for national security and sovereignty. Insiders claim that Chinese companies are already negotiating control over several key points in Britain's energy and telecommunications sectors. Officially, this has not yet been confirmed, but the fact remains: Britain is not initiating any strict protection of its strategic industries, and the United States is forced to watch as one of its most reliable partners drifts toward its rival without serious resistance. And here comes the culmination. When America's closest ally begins to act outside the US orbit and China's influence simultaneously grows, it sends a signal to everyone: Washington should be responding. But while American diplomacy and military strategy remain static, China is gaining an open window of opportunity: access to infrastructure, Yuan-based settlements, growing influence in Britain, and consequently, in Europe. All this erodes part of America's room for maneuver and makes Washington less effective in its global strategy. In conclusion, Britain, once seen as the firm guardian of Western interests, is now becoming a platform for change. China is expanding its position not through war or brute force, but through money, investment, and persuasion. The United States, despite its loud declarations, remains a spectator, and time is passing. If tomorrow London announces a major deal with Beijing or adopts the yuan as a settlement currency, there will be no return to the previous geopolitical order. But behind this entire story lies another layer: the influence China is building not only through capital, but also through culture, education, and media. According to the Financial Times and BBC Panorama, in recent years, the number of joint educational programs between British and Chinese universities has been growing rapidly, including exchanges in the fields of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and energy, areas directly related to national security. Moreover, Chinese corporations are beginning to fund research in British scientific centers, thereby gaining indirect access to dual-use technologies. Insiders claim that some of these projects are supervised by organizations close to China's Ministry of Industry, and Washington is deeply concerned about the possible leakage of advanced British developments. What is especially alarming is that more and more British politicians are publicly speaking about a new realism: the need for dialogue with China rather than confrontation. In the corridors of Westminster, phrases are already being heard that America can no longer dictate the rules to the world. At first glance, these are just political reflections, but in essence, they reflect the growing influence of Beijing. China acts not through threats, but through economic dependence, soft power, cultural ties, and vast financial resources. It does not demand, it offers. And Britain, weakened by internal crises and post-Brexit instability, agrees. Washington, meanwhile, is losing its levers of pressure. Even within NATO, there are now growing discussions about whether relations with China should be redefined in favor of pragmatic cooperation. And if this trend continues, within just a few years, we may see a completely new configuration of power, where Britain becomes not only a bridge between East and West, but also the arena where the final question is decided: who will set the rules of the 21st century, America or China?